welcome back to TDO, named CT, and today we're going to be dealing with isometric circles. Now, when you are required to draw an isometric circle, you're going to be given a radius or a diameter, the same case as if like you were required to draw a normal circle. Now, you cannot just take that radius or the diameter and then you place your compass at the center and then you start rotating your compass. Your circle is not going to come out like this instead. Instead, it's going to come out like this. You're gonna get this circle that is gonna be facing directly at you. And this is not an isometric circle, this is just a normal circle, which is wrong. An isometric circle is something that is like that. Now you cannot just place your compass at one point and then start rotating it, hoping to come up with something like that. There's a method that you should apply in order for you to come up with an isometric circle, and that is what I'm here to show you today. So in this case, we are required to draw this isometric circle that has a diameter of 50. Now, the first thing that you do when you create an isometric circle is you come up with a square. And the dimensions of the square, you take them from what? From the diameter given. It's either the diameter or the radius. You take those dimensions of the square from there. Since our diameter was given as 50 millimeters, which means each side of that square should be 50. So now let's go ahead and create our square. Now, when we're dealing with an isometric, you also should keep in mind that everything that you do should be elevated at an angle of 30. So now what you do when you're creating an isometric circle, you take your 30-degree angled ruler, you draw a line that goes there at an angle of 30, and then you draw another one that goes that direction at an angle of 30. And by that I mean from there, that angle should be 30 degrees, and on the side, same thing applies also. The angle should be 30 degrees. Now the next thing that you do, you mark 50 millimeters on each side and each line. 50 millimeters from there, and then the second line should also be 50 millimeters. And then carrying on from there, you're gonna have to complete your square. So which means you already came up with the two sides of the square. So the side that is missing now is another 50 millimeters that goes that direction, and it should be parallel to that line. Every line that you draw, you use your 30-60 ruler and then you use your 30-degree side to draw that line, and then now you carry on and close your square. So now you have created your square. The next step that you take is you figure out the center line of each side of the square, which means since each side is 50 millimeters long, the center of that side is gonna be at 25 millimeters. So we're gonna have our 25 millimeters there. You mark the 25, you come over to the other line, you mark the 25, you go over there, you mark the 25 at the centers of the lines. All the four sides, you mark the centers of those sides. And by doing that, you're already halfway there because now you're only left with few steps to complete. So after marking your center points, you're gonna have to join the longest side. And by that, I mean by joining these 2 points right there. If you can join this point at the bottom and the other point at the top, the distance from this point to the top point is shorter than the distance from this point to the other point. So you always choose the 2 points whereby there is a larger distance apart, and then you go ahead and join those points like that. And then the next step, you create a V, which means you're gonna have to choose now between this point and that point at the bottom. If you choose the point at the bottom, your V is gonna go and plug there on the left hand side, and then it's gonna go over and plug on the right hand center. If you're gonna initiate your V at this top point here, it's gonna go over and plug at this bottom left center, and then the other part of the V is gonna go over and plug at this bottom right center. For this case, I'm gonna choose the top point. You choose the top point, the single V, it goes to the bottom left center, and then another single part of the V, it starts from the same point, it goes over and plug on the bottom right center. Now you're already done with the constructions of the circle The next thing that you do now, you mark out your intersection points, which is 1 and 2 right there. So now the only thing that is left for you is to complete with the circle. So now we have 4 centers here. This center there is number 1, we have the second center there, we have the third, and we have the final center at the bottom. Alright, so the next thing that you do, you take your compass, you place it at that center, that station point there. You open it up to there. Automatically it's gonna go over. If everything was done accurate, when you place your compass there, it should go over and touch there, the second point right there. And then if it touches, you carry on and construct your curve. You come to the opposite center, you open your compass to the center, you do the same thing. Now you place your compass here, you open it up to the opposite point. You join what's remaining of the arcs. You come to the bottom, you place it there, you close everything up like this. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how you draw an isometric circle. So now let's go over and put our skills to the test. So now in this case, let's go over and reproduce this drawing right here. This isometric drawing. The reason why I created this problem is because it includes all the type of isometric circles, whereby you have a single hole there, and then here you have a hole with a depth, which means you're gonna have to create 2 circles. And then at the top, we have a cylindrical type. So now we're gonna go over and draw all these 3 faces so that you're gonna be equipped with all the skills. Each side of the cube is 100 millimeters, which means that side right there is 100, 100, 100, another 100, resulting to a square. Alright, we all know that when you're about to create an isometric, you draw an isometric box first. So already our drawing has a cube whereby each of the sides is given as 100 millimeters, 100 millimeters. So now let's start by drawing the circle that is at this face first, and then we're gonna continue to go over and deal with the other surfaces. So the circle is at diameter 50. So you remember what I showed you earlier on? You use the diameter to come up with a square. We're gonna have to create a square in this surface that is gonna have 4 sides of 50 millimeters each. So let's go over and create the square. The first thing that you do before you create that square, you should mark the center points of these lines, of these 4 lines, because we are dealing with this face right here, which means we're going to have to get the center point there. We're going to have to get another center point there. You mark 2 center points and you transfer. By that I mean you're gonna have to mark 50, because from that point to that point is 100 millimeters. You're gonna have to mark 50. So and then you go over and mark your center point at 50, and then you're gonna go to the other side or this side. You're gonna choose, you mark 50 right there, and then the next step that you do, you draw your center lines. You draw from up to down, and you continue drawing from the second mark point across to the other center point. And then now this center line that is going up there, you should also it should also continue to go over and mark at another center at the top. And then this one right here, it should also go across this surface here and mark on the next center point right there, because in future you're gonna need this center point. So now let's go back to our main surface, whereby we have to create our circle. So now you've done with your center lines. The next thing that you do, you take your compass, you open it up to 25, because remember the diameter of the circle is what is 50. You take your compass, you open it up to 25 millimeters, and then you use that center point right there. You use the center point that is there to mark 25 millimeters there, 25 millimeters there, 25 millimeters there, and another 25 millimeters there. So by that I mean you measure 25 millimeters from the center to the top side, you measure another 25 millimeters from the center to the bottom, and then you go over to to the cross, you measure another 25 and then another 25 right there. Now, what you do is from this point, you draw a line that is parallel to that line, which means you take your 30-degree angle ruler, you just draw a line that passes exactly at the point right there. Now you do the same thing for your bottom point. At an angle of 30 degrees, you draw another line right there. Now what's left for you to do is to join this line and that line with a line that is going to pass through that point on the left hand side. There you go. You have your line right there. Same thing applies for the other side right there. And now you have produced your square right there. The next step, you have to look for the 2 points that are far apart from each other. So if you look at this distance from that point to that point, it's not equal to the distance from that point to that point. The distance from this point to that point is greater than the distance from this point to that point. So what you do, you join the points that have a greater distance apart. So you take your ruler, you join the points that have a greater distance apart, like that. And then the next thing that you do, you create a V. We have two unused points. We have this point and that point as our remaining points now. So we're going to have to choose a single point that we're going to work with. Let's choose this one. You draw another V that's going to start from this point to that center, and then another part of the V that's going to start from this point to that center. So which means your line is going to start here to the opposite center, and then the second line starts from the very same point to the opposite center. Now this is the V that I'm talking about. You have completed the construction of the circle. The only thing that is left for you to analyze is the center point whereby you're going to place your compass, which is center point number 1 right there. We have a center point number 2 right there. We have a center point number 3 right there, and we have a center point number 4 right there. 4 center method. So now remember that everything you did here, you did it in faint lines. Now the only thing that is left from you is to take your compass and create the 4 curves of your circle using those 4 center lines that you've marked out. Place your compass there. You complete the first curve. Now the second curve, it have to be at this center point right there. You open it up to that center line. You complete your curve. Now for your third curve, we have that center point there. You open it up to there. It should go over and close on the following point. Now for our last center point and our last curve. Just like that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is how you come up with an isometric circle. So now let's go over and deal with the one that is at the right hand side. Now it's time for us to deal with what? With the right hand side, which has that kind of a hole right there. So what we need to do is to recreate that kind of a hole. Same thing applies. We use the diameter 50 to create that hole right there. Now when we come to this side, there are basically 2 circles right there. We have a hole which is represented by the circle that's on the surface, and then we have another circle inside because now we have depth. Now if you want to create the hole at the right hand side, you follow the very same steps of the isometric circle, which means now you're going to have to mark a center line from the top side to the bottom side. And then remember the rule of an isometric. It shouldn't end there. It should go over and continue to the other side. And then your center line is complete like that. Now, let's focus on our area right there. We have diameter 50 for the hole. Since our diameter is 50, we're going to have to create a square that is at 50. You know the drill. You have to mark from the center because we have a center point there. You have to mark from the center 25 millimeters. You mark another 25 millimeters at this side. all equals to 250. And then from the center, you deal with the vertical now. You mark 25, you mark another 25 right there. And then the next thing you do, you take your 30-degree angled ruler, you create a parallel line right there that's gonna pass exactly at the point. It should pass exactly at that point. And then you do the same thing for the bottom point. And then your last step to complete the square, you close the remaining sides right there. You close it there, and then you close the other side as well. Now we have our square right there. You already know the next thing that you're supposed to do. You join that point and that point, and then you create a V. So let's carry on and do just that. You join that point and that point, and then you create a V to that center point. You create another part of the V to that opposite center point, and you are done. Remember, we could have used this point as well to create a V from this point to that point, and from the very same point to that center point over there. Now, you already know the next thing that you should do. You pull up your compass, you place it at that center, you produce the first arc. Second step, you place it at that center, you produce the second arc. You have your center right there, you produce the opposite large arc. And then, as for your last step, you close everything up just like that. There you go. Coming back to our original sketch, we're already done with that circle right there. But now there's something missing. That piece over there, that's on the inside. We should be able to create that depth. We should show that depth. Now let's say our depth was 15 millimeters. The deepness of the hole on the side is 15 millimeters. So what you do, you have to enlarge all the four corners of this square right there. The very same square that you used to create the first circle. So by that, you pull up your 30-degree ruler, you place it right there at the corner, you enlarge by 15. You do the same thing for the other corner. You move over to the third, you enlarge by 15, and then you go over to the final point. You pull it by 15 also. Now after extending all your corners, you go ahead and join all the four corners so that you can come up with what? With a second square. But now notice how the second square is going inside the box. It's going inside the cube now, which is exactly what we need because the hole is going inside. First one right there, the second one right there, the third right there, and then finally the fourth. Now let's pay attention to what is going on inside the cube right now. We've already created our square for what? For the circle. So what do you do when you're creating an isometric circle after completing the square? The next thing that you do, you mark what? Your centers. But pay attention to this. You already have your centers right there. 1, 2, 3, and 4 from your previous work. The only thing that you do now, you take your what? You take your 30-degree angle ruler, you transfer these centers. You transfer the center 1, center 2, center 3, and center 4 with your what? With your 30-degree angle ruler. So let's start with the transfer. 1, you go over to transfer the other center. Second one, you go over to transfer the third. Right there. And then you go to the last center, you transfer it. Just like that. Now, the next thing that you do after transferring your centers, You join what? You join the 2 points that have the longest distance apart, which in this case is this point and that point right there. And in the next step, you construct a V from that point down there. And you already know that where should your V go. If you construct it from there, it should go and touch that center, and then it should go over and touch this center also. We go over and do that. Your V touches that center and that center also. Now the next thing that you do, you mark out your center point. One up there and the second one down here. We have the third one and the fourth one down there. Alright, now the part of the circle that is on the top of the surface is this one, and that one right there, and that one. Now you should keep in mind and use that part as your guidelines so that you cannot outline the inner part of the circle, the only part that you cannot see. So now you go over and use your centers to construct your curves. There is your first center right there. It goes up there. It closes right there. The second center, which is that one, it goes to that point. It closes at that point. The third one, which is right there, it goes to that point. You close it at that point. And then you move over to the third center. You close it. And then you shift to the last. And you close everything up. Just like that. So now we've completed both of your circles now. You have the outer circle and the inner circle. Everything that you've done so far, you've done it in faint line. The only thing that you outline the only thing that you are sure about. If you outline something, you mean that you are sure you're not gonna erase it. Because you only outline when you are done with the drawing. You do not outline when you are not done. Now, since we were done with this side over there, you can outline everything from there before you shift over to this side so that you can be able to save time. But from this side, you don't outline anything because you are not done. Now let's go on and finish up this side of the drawing, whereby we're only going to be able to see what the whole part of the circle that's at the surface. And then next, you start outlining the inner part of the circle, whereby our one of the centers is right there. Just like that. And then now, you shift over to the other center, which is this one right there. Now pay attention. You cannot place your compass at that center and then outline all the way from that point to that point. Why is that? Because you cannot see the inner part of the circle from here. You can only see where it ends. You cannot see the inner part of the circle. So you place your compass there, you open it up to there, you only outline from there. Just like that. And then the next point, whereby you are using that center right there, you outline from that point, and then when you meet there, the outer circle, that's where your compass stops. This is how you represent a depth of a circle. Now let's carry on and come out with this cylindrical shape up there. And we're gonna take the height as what? As 25 millimeters. Now remember, we have our diameter 50 for the circles. So it's 25 from the center to the side. You mark 25. And then you mark another 25 from the center to the side. You mark another 25 from the center to the side. You are creating a cross. You mark another 25 millimeters to the other side. Then the next thing, you draw two lines, which is one passing at that point and then the second one passing at that point also. The next thing, you close the remaining sides of the square, which is from that point and that point right there. Alright, now the next step that you do You join that point and that point. You already know the drill. And then the next step, you choose a point that you're gonna create your V from. Let's choose this one. If it goes to the center, it goes to the center. Next thing you do, you highlight your center points for your compass right there and there. And then the last step, you produce your what? Your isometric circle. There you go. Now we've completed the base of the circle. Now what's left to do? We should extend to the upside because now our circle is going to the upside because now we are creating a cylinder. So given that the height of that shim or the height of that cylinder is 25 millimeters, which means we have to extend all these four corners to the upside by 25 millimeters. So now let's go over and extend the corners. Let's start with this one. And now the next step, you close all your corners to complete your square. Just like that. And then the next step, you do the very same thing that you did when we were working with our right side right here. We transferred our original centers to our newly created square. So you do the same thing even on this side. You transfer the center to your square. Alright, after transferring all the centers, you know the drill. You join what? The 2 points that have a greater distance apart, which in this case is the very same point as our bottom square. Right there. Just like that. The next thing you join what? You create the V to the center right there. And then the next thing that you do, you pull up your compass, you close your circle. And then now we start outlining everything, what we can see and what we cannot see. So let's start over from that part right there. We are all sure that we can see the outer part that is at the top. So let's go ahead and outline that one. Now the next thing you do from this point right there to that point right there, you draw a straight line that is going downwards. Exactly like that. You move over to the other side, you produce the same thing. That point right there to that point right there. And then you carry on outlining this outer part of your circle. And then the next thing you go over and outline the base of your cube. And then you go over and outline the rest of the drawing. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we are done for today's session. See you on the next one. Have a good one.